having, financial stress from COVID and emotional stress from COVID coming in, it's just been really tough. So I think, doing it tough means a lot at the moment, aside from just financially. I could probably get by with a bit of groceries and extra things, but it's just like a bit of extra love to some of us who may not feel it right now has been really important.
I'm Dani Valent, and this is Dirty Linen, the podcast that takes the issues the hospitality industry finds hard to air in public and shakes them all about. We're continuing our discussions with and about temporary visa workers in hospitality in Dirty Linen this week. And I'm really excited and happy to have as part of the conversation Kaitlin Chase. Kaitlin is a bright spark that I've met through the Attica Soup Project. So every Thursday we give out soup and groceries to people on temporary visas who are doing it tough in these crazy times. And it's always a delight to have Kaitlin come along. But yeah, Kaitlin, it's not easy times, is it?
Not at the moment in any way at all.
Tell me a little bit about what's going on for you.
Yeah, so of course, there is the COVID that we all know and hate at the moment. But the year and the past couple of years have been quite rough for me, with family at home in Texas being quite sick. Last year, my dad was diagnosed with brain cancer in January of 2019. My mom this year in January was diagnosed with a stage 4 lymphoma. And yeah, my sister is actually currently incarcerated with a failed liver. And it just sounds wild to everyone, I'm sure, so I'll stop it there. But it's a huge family drama at home. And having, financial stress from COVID and emotional stress from COVID coming in, it's just been really tough. So I think, doing it tough means a lot at the moment, aside from just financially. I could probably get by with a bit of groceries and extra things, but it's just like a bit of extra love to some of us who may not feel it right now has been really important.
It's so much going on. And you checked flights home to Texas the other day, and how much is a ticket home?
Yeah, well, it's changed since then. But the day that I checked it, the day that I was making the decision of whether or not to even investigate, the hoops to jump through to get home and back, it was $15,000 that day for a return ticket.
Yeah, that's super crazy.
Just to get there fast enough, that is, because I didn't mention it, but it was really, the need to leave the day or the next, because my mom was placed in hospice care 2 nights ago. So it was really the immediacy for that figure.
Wow. I really feel for you. And Texas as well is super crazy right now.
Yeah, I think they're still coming up around, 500 to 600 deaths. Oh God, I don't even know. I don't look at it anymore. I tried not to think about it. My family, luckily, aren't in, they're not really in probably close contact with anyone, since they are already so immunocompromised. So I sort of shut it out. But yeah, it's a crazy place right now because of the virus, protests, all sorts of things.
Yeah, I think when the pandemic began, obviously there were countries in Europe like Italy and Spain that were doing it so tough. And I guess the US response from the beginning was questionable, to say the least. But I guess the countries that you'd sort of, I assumed we'd feel, stricken about thinking about anyone going back to would perhaps more be countries, developing countries. I guess the United States, I just thought it was, if you needed to go home to the US, you just go home to the US, if you needed for family reasons to head back there or whatever it was. But it's certainly, the US feels like a place that you just wouldn't want anyone to need to return to at the moment.
No, it's really bizarre, isn't it? Because, if you don't know in great depth, but some people do, some people don't. But, obviously everyone is learning that our healthcare system is really poor. Social support is very poor. There's not a whole lot that the government really does for people, and people are quite independent. So, it's a big fight at the moment between people who are for social change and those who aren't. For example, I was reading an article a friend posted just about, Senator Ted Cruz saying, who is from Texas, that waiters and waitresses didn't deserve further support, unemployment support, because they were being lazy and probably making more on unemployment than they were making in their jobs. But what most people don't know is, on a paycheck when I worked in Texas, I made $2.13 an hour. So it is possible that people were making more on unemployment, but it's skewed,
Right.
So here I see, I get a bit annoyed about JobKeeper and that sort of thing, but for me to have gone home wouldn't have made much difference. I would be in the same situation or worse.
Wow. So tell us about your situation here. You've been, you first came to Australia about 5 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yes, I did, on a working holiday visa, January 2015. And then I've worked front of house in some really great restaurants since then, like quite, notable, and had really, good and different and interesting experiences. I've applied for a partner visa with my partner, Matt, and I've just finally been able to apply for my permanent residency last week. So I've been on a bit of a roller coaster of having a job here, having a job at home, going back and forth, trying to figure out what to do. So I think just as the last year or so was setting in and I could finally breathe a bit more comfortably, it's all kind of gone in shambles again. I'm trying to work a couple takeaway shifts, find anything to do. But at the moment now, my mental state is sort of a little bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine.
To deal with. I mean, I'm fine, but it's just can be hard to motivate. I see everyone with their cool side hustles and everything, and I'm like, ooh, I could market those cookies I gave you. But now I'm like, I think I'll just hide in my sofa hole.
Well, I think that's it. It's like it takes so much energy to keep hustling and to keep changing. And with a situation that's so fluid, 1 minute you're wondering if you should go home, the next you're, applying for permanent residency here. I mean, it's all very taxing and draining.
Yeah, and I think it's it's just something that, I didn't really think too much about when I moved here. I was like, this is exciting. Going to Australia, I'm going to live here. This is great. And then, one family member got sick, and then the next one, and the next one, and I was just going, okay, now what do I do? I'm pretty established, as so many people here are. To make a choice like that is not just, financial. It's just so full-on emotional that you just don't know what to do, And so I can only imagine what, all of us, so many of us are going through. That's not just a financial worry.
Yeah, if you could see like all the thoughts and emotions and the strands of thinking and, that if you could see that roller coaster that people feel like they're on so much, like it would just be a very busy sight, wouldn't it? It would just, you could just be like crayon drawing and scrolling all through it would just be a crackling craziness of radio waves and activity. So there must just be such a swirl of thoughts and emotions that you're going through.
Yeah. And I mean, and at the same time, still trying to work, and so many of us just trying to do something. And, at the same time, watching so many businesses here struggle. And I'm absolutely not insensitive to that. Everyone's having a bit of a rough time. I completely understand, but it's so different sometimes. Even, I'm the only person in front of house at my job that isn't on JobKeeper or Job Seeker. And I'm so happy to have been able to stay. I'm very lucky to have a few shifts, but, that also kind of wears on a person going, I'm still alive. I'm showing up and I have to, and, I'm going to work tonight. even though everyone keeps telling me to stay home. I'm like, well, I don't know that staying home will help my mom out, but so I'm just, like a lot of other people probably are trying to do, it can be a little discouraging when, you can't do what you're used to. You can't be as self-sufficient as you're used to.
I think it must also be really hard when, you've just been at your workplace and everyone's just sort of just, on the roster and it's just you're all in it together, and then you've got this device called JobKeeper which really separates you out from the rest of your workmates.
Yeah, and it felt like that a lot, and not in a way that it was anybody's fault, but honestly, if I were going, if I were getting paid the JobKeeper and I didn't have to work, I wouldn't be over here going, just let me in there, and I'm like that right now because I'd take as many shifts as they'd give me. I know that I'm only on a couple to, keep finances in order for them, and that's completely fine, but I can understand, some people's mentality, but it just makes it really frustrating for, a lot of people who want to work but can't, and I think that's, where some of that fairness in JobKeeper could have come out. I've worked at my job for almost 2 years, and I was working, nearly full-time hours. And I think that something like that would have been the sort of thing that should have been considered, for some of us who are people. I work with chefs who are sponsored, who are in the same boat. They've nearly been able to get a permanent residency or been here long enough. And it's just hard. I wish that something like that had been considered, just the time that we've spent at our jobs.
Yeah, well, I guess it was considered for Australians or permanent residents in terms of, casuals who'd been in jobs for more than 12 months were eligible for JobKeeper if they were residents, Australian citizens or permanent residents. But the temporary visa holders such as yourself and the sponsored workers that you're talking about were excluded from JobKeeper. And unfortunately, as we've seen in the past couple of weeks, the JobKeeper review has come out and JobKeeper has been extended, but the eligibility criteria have not been expanded to include people such as yourself, which I don't think is right, because it just leaves you in absolute limbo and desperate for whatever shifts you can scrape together. But I think that's also a situation that can put people who are in that position and the rest of our community in danger if you're so desperate that you would have a sniffle or a scratchy throat, but you still felt that you couldn't say no to a shift that was put before you. So I'm certainly not saying that you would do that or you'd be in that position, but you can totally see how people would be when they're so desperate, but they're not able to get any assistance to stay away if they're not feeling well.
Definitely. And I think, it's the thing definitely with us who have these 2 shifts and need to get in for that money and get that support because we're not getting it otherwise. But I think there are also a lot of people and just things I've thought about or heard that, if you're a business owner and your business relies on you showing up to work, something like that, you would think a few times over, should I go or should I get the test? Should I risk being at home? I don't know. There's a lot for everyone to think about. And I think that's quite a huge issue. But luckily, if you are Australian, you will have that bit of support. And if you're not, or not a permanent resident, then yeah, we've got a bit more to think about probably.
Yeah, I did hear news just this week that people working under the awards that apply in aged care settings will be able to access pandemic leave. And I haven't read into it closely, but it sounds like that it's just a matter of being under the award, that it doesn't actually depend on your visa status. So I'm hoping that that's a little ray of light where, a little, the door is just opening a crack and we can push it open a bit further, and that some of those, some of the other awards, including the Hospitality Industry Award and the Restaurant Industry Award, will also have provisions such as that, where there is pandemic leave for everybody who is working under those awards. So I don't know, I feel like there's always new angles to try, and the scenario is always changing, so there's new ways to agitate and push for change. But I just wish it wasn't so hard and so draining and so wearing for people such as yourself.
Yeah, and I feel sort of it's tough sometimes when people are like, oh, the government's so harsh and it's so bad. And I I can agree that things could be different, of course. But, when I also look at things in the way they're going at home, I just try to keep an open mind and with everything, really, because I kind of think it could be worse. Honestly, it's a weird thing to hear, probably, like you said, someone from the United States kind of going, I don't want to be there, but I don't really want to be there aside from, to be with my family. But that's pretty impossible just given the current climate.
Yeah. Oh, no, I do understand. The United States just seems so fraught and so scary. Like looking forward to the election, that seems like it's, I don't know, it just seems like there's no certainty. I could never imagine that Trump would have got in 2016. It seems so clear that he can't get in 2020. But then, I mean, I just feel like I have no certainty about sensible things happening in the world right now. Just feels like anything could happen.
Exactly. Sensible is a good word. You're not even talking about good. You're just talking about sensible. Like, please let it make sense. And
that's it.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like I'll just go with sensible. Not great, sensible. Maybe make America sensible again is a good slogan for somebody out there.
Yeah, that would be good. Hey, so I remember when we were probably maybe in the first month of the soup project, we made a Mexican, or it was like a Tex-Mex bean soup. It was a bit of a made-up recipe. We got some really beautiful sofrito from Radio Mexico in St. Kilda. They helped us out with some ingredients, and it was all super delicious. And tell me what you thought of that soup.
Oh God, what did I say about it? It was actually really tasty. It was just the funniest, but most ultimate Tex-Mex combination because the beef was really smoky. It reminded me of brisket, but it still had all of this sort of Tex-Mex soup. So I won't speak for Mexico because obviously I'm more familiar with Tex-Mex cuisine, just that sort of fusion. But it was like having Texas barbecue in a Mexican flavored soup. It was quite good. It reminded me of home.
So tell me about the food of Texas. Tell me what you miss, and also you can be honest. Tell me how we do with that kind of food here.
Honestly, it's gotten since I've been here for my 5 years, I've found so many American foods to just have gotten exponentially better. Just foods that I'm familiar with. But I've also been here long enough to investigate and find places that remind me most of home. But I wouldn't say I miss a good burger because I can find a good burger now, but that's a good one. Love, barbecue, smoked meats, just done the bit of fatty way because I find that's always missing a little bit. Just get the extra flavors. Margaritas, I've told you this before, my just reasonably priced fresh margaritas on the rocks, not up. There's just a few little things, but I found that now, I can basically get, aside from, niche chain food like Whataburger, the best drive-through fast food burgers in the world, I can get most things here. Or I can make them, I've learned to make them. I did actually bake last weekend, I forgot. I made a cobbler.
Oh, you made a cobbler?
Yeah, which most people think of crumble, but it's more like a bready topping that just kind of is cakey and soaks up all the juicy cinnamony goodness of fruit.
What fruit did you put in it?
Oh, so I had some delicious apples from the Attica Soup Project and a few pears from a friend of ours. So it was apple and pear. They're my favorites of peach.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Yeah. Peaches will come back before we know it. So margaritas, are you saying, is a margarita served up? Is that when it's more blended and the ice is all the way through it?
No, I've just when I've ordered margaritas quite often in Melbourne because it's such a cocktail-centric, city, and I hope nobody gets mad at me for this because Melbourne margaritas are delicious and there's nothing wrong with them. But I, usually have them in sort of a coupe or something, served up, totally fine. It's delicious. It's chilled. It's great. But I do, I just grew up, not as a child, but, in my of age years, drinking margaritas either frozen or on the rocks. And frozen's definitely not often available here. I found it at a few places. Fonda had a great one not long ago. Um, but I do, I just miss the way that I've been used to serving them. And there's a few spots that are pretty on it at the moment.
Okay. Oh, that's good to know. So I'm really happy to hear that you're able. I'm really happy to hear that you're able to apply for permanent residency on the basis of a partner visa. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and what it's like to negotiate Australia's visa system?
Yeah, thank you. No, it's honestly, I've never had to negotiate another country's visa system. So for me, it's quite straightforward to a point. My first visa I applied to stay here actually was the work sponsored visa. And that one was a fail for understandable reasons, but I really came to understand the process as it's a legal situation, You have to, and I have a journalism degree myself, and so I'm pretty aware of how to properly support arguments, what evidence is needed, how to be completely sure that you're presenting accurate information. But I think that was a big thing for me that helped personally. I used a lawyer once for a consultation, but I think a lot of people benefit greatly from using a lawyer because I found it a little bit tricky and taxing. You put in the first application. When you do, that was for us around $7,000. And that was, an emotional thing, a couple trying to decide if they really wanted to be together. And of course we did, but it's just, it's one thing. And then that went in and you're waiting and waiting. And at the moment, the wait time for the temporary visa is quite long. I applied in July of 2018 and I got the decision at the end of April this year. And then 2 months later, I'm eligible to apply for the permanent one. I just hoped, why didn't you give it to me now? But yeah, it's just constantly uploading documents, looking for evidence, thinking about, for us in particular, where, when I could take a picture with friends or family and not make it seem like I was just trying to do it for the visa, which I've heard someone say, doing it for the visa. But it's a weird thing to think about in your relationship. And every time we've been able to get past applications and deadlines and due dates and fees, everything's been really good. But I think, similarly, I've had so many friends on student visas stressing out because their visa wasn't approved and they'd already paid for school, or there's just sometimes a lot of uncertainty that goes into it.
Yeah, and I guess a weight that's on a relationship that, there's a weight that's on a relationship that's not in a relationship that's not also entangled with visa issues.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that we're lucky to have. It would be much harder for my partner to go to the United States, and it's not really what we wanted to do. So we're lucky to have the option, but it definitely placed a weight. And just for the long periods of waiting and not knowing, it took me almost 2 years to know if I was going to be able to stay here even, on the temporary visa. And now that, that's part of the reason I couldn't go home, really, when I heard about my mom this week, because I wouldn't have, as a permanent resident, I couldn't come back in guaranteed either. So I'm still in the limbo zone.
Yeah, of course.
Still in the limbo zone, but I'm thankful to be in that zone, but it is taxing.
Have you been able to talk to your family and ask them what they think you should do? Like, did they think you should stay here, or do they wish you would come home?
I mean, I'm sure they wish I could come home, in a perfect world. And not even in a perfect world, a few months ago, if this had happened, it would have, I did visit home in February when I learned that my mom was so sick. But I think they understand too that, like I said, I have a life here too. And for me to go now, I wouldn't be guaranteed to come back in, a reasonable amount of time. I don't want to be morbid, but I'll probably, miss my mom by a few days, given the way flights are at the moment. not many are going out, so I'd have to fly west instead of east across the Pacific. So basically go around the world. Not all the way, but.
Oh, really?
So the flight's longer. In addition to being more expensive, I have to go through Doha at the moment. But it's, I think they've said they understand, and of course, you can't. Yeah, if I could get there in time, if she were getting any better, but as someone goes into hospice, it's palliative. That's the end of life. So that's rough.
It's so rough. Yeah, it's really tough. Kaitlin, I think, you're super brave for having a chat to me today when you're right in the thick of it. And as you say, you're really on that roller coaster and, you don't quite know what's around the bend. But I really thank you for sharing your story. It's really important that people have real people behind these statistics and facts about visa workers. You're not just one more visa worker. You're a real person with a really powerful story, and a lot to give. So thank you for giving to Australia. Thanks for the cookies the other week. They were super delicious. And I really wish you and your family all the best.
Thank you very much, Dani. And thank you for doing all of this, because like I said, and I think I've said to you from the beginning, it's a bit of emotional support, when we're not getting that financial sort of thing, just to have someone out there with our back is so excellent.
It's my pleasure. I look forward to celebrating your permanent residency.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Take care. This is Dirty Linen, and I'm Dani Valent. We air the issues that the hospitality industry finds hard to talk about. We spend a week thrashing around each issue, hearing from different people with unique perspectives. We want to hear from you as well. If you have something that needs to be said about a topic, get in touch so we can include your perspective. Contact us at dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au or hit us up on Insta at Dirty Linen Podcast. We can't wait to hear from you.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.